Mayor Adams's latest move is a turning point in New York's year-long immigration crisis. But who is to decide if this is the right move or if it is nothing more than an inconvenience because a city government doesn't know how to manage the immigrants coming into the city? Better yet, is this because the city's government doesn't know how to manage the immigrants entering the city in the first place? Mayor Adams considers a policy causing thousands of migrants to be thrown into the streets, citing a decades-old law requiring shelter for all in need. With almost 60,000 migrants under the city's care, Adams has chosen to terminate single adult shelters after 2 months, and thousands will be evicted. The arrival of more than 100,000 migrants since the spring of 2022 has pushed shelters to capacity and prompted the city to put people in tents. With many of their stays coming to an end, migrants will be forced to live in one of the world's most costly cities. According to housing and immigrant groups, many migrants who are driven out of shelters will be forced to sleep on the streets. There are 2 crises at hand at the moment. One is the shortage of shelters and the increasing influx of immigrants. The second is the intensified crime rate due to the impossibly high costs of living. For decades, New York has been a haven for immigrants fleeing persecution, political upheaval, and economic hardship. People from all over the world come to New York to build a better life for themselves. It was a city full of opportunities at every turn. But sadly, that is not true anymore. Mayor Adams wants the immigrants to find a permanent solution for their shelters and livelihood after 60 days, because after that, they will not be allowed to stay in the shelter for homeless people. People have been arguing that the 60-day shelter restriction is unrealistic and contradicts the city's long-standing duty to provide a bed to anyone in need, which dates back to 1981. The city has issued over 10,800 60-day notifications thus far. Meanwhile, the administration filed to a judge requesting that the right to shelter be suspended due to the migrant inflow. These negotiations are now ongoing in court. However, driving people out of shelters might help to emphasize a point Adams has been trying to make for months. The city's capacity for new arrivals has already reached its limit and will require additional state and federal assistance. Adams has appealed for more assistance from President Joe Biden and Hochul, openly criticizing both in a departure from his typically good ties with fellow Democrats. Finally, help showed up, and the Biden administration agreed to offer temporary protection status to Venezuelan migrants. However, Adams stated that it would affect less than 10,000 of the approximately 60,000 migrants in the city's care. According to officials, hundreds more arrive every single day. How is it possible to be able to accommodate all of them? We cannot continue to be left nearly entirely alone to solve a national crisis on which the state and federal governments have refused to take meaningful action, City Hall spokesperson Kayla Mamalek said in a statement. The administration has opened 200 emergency shelters and spent more than $2 billion on the crisis thus far. Adams also declared that he would limit new immigrants' shelter stays to 30 days. Migrants reaching 60 days without alternative accommodations will face a 30-day limit on fresh shelter placements and increased casework services. Most migrants now lack work permits, and while many arrived intending to formally seek asylum, there's a scarcity of immigration lawyers to guide them through the application procedure. As a result, some of them have missed critical dates, potentially limiting their legal choices and leaving them undocumented. Anecdotally, migrants appear to be able to obtain jobs under the table. However, for many, it is insufficient to make a living out of it on their own, especially in New York City, where rents have risen since the COVID-19 outbreak. The strain on the system caused by the migrant inflow has caused the city and state to establish tent cities on unoccupied government land around the 5 boroughs to accommodate the influx of new migrants. Before the migrant crisis, there were approximately 45,000 New Yorkers in homeless shelters. Today, there are more than 100,000. Adams has relocated hundreds of migrants to the suburbs and upstate, causing a distinct uproar among local towns. The failure of the city government to provide immigrants with the right aid resulted in a higher crime rate in New York City. This is because the immigrants have to find a way to feed their mouths by any means necessary. There has been an increased rate of crime, which is mostly committed by the migrants in the city. A recent attack on police officers in New York City's Times Square by a group of migrants, most of whom were released on bail, has sparked a U.S. election year political furor. At least 12 suspects were involved in the attack, with 6 arrested and 5 released on bail. Immigration is a hot issue ahead of the November 2024 U.S. general election, with over 6.3 million migrants crossing into the U.S. illegally since 2021, affecting President Joe Biden's re-election chances. CCTV footage shows officers being attacked by assailants, leaving them with minor injuries. Democrats and Republicans have joined in calling for the suspects to be deported, with Kathy Hochul urging authorities to get them all and send them back. Assaulting a police officer is considered a federal crime in the U.S., and it can serve as grounds for deportation. Republican Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis expressed disgust at the disrespect towards laws and law enforcement. The Republicans in New York are calling for the governor to send National Guard troops to the U.S. border with Canada and Mexico to help stem the flow of migrants, because it gets more impossible to accommodate these migrants and their numbers only seem to be growing every single day. The New York Police Department has expressed anger over the incident, with Patrick Hendry, president of the Police Benevolent Association, questioning why the other suspects were released. Yohenry Brito, 24, is the only migrant accused of involvement in the attack who remains in jail. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office said the other suspects were released as evidence is still being gathered. And this is not the only incident that has taken place in recent times. The scale of the crime has increased, and it seems like there is no stopping it. Venezuela's violent gang, El Tren de Aragua, has been reportedly bringing its criminal schemes to New York City. New Yorkers have been terrorized by moped thieves who have been stealing phones and purses from innocent pedestrians. A 62-year-old woman was dragged on a Brooklyn street by a thief on a moped, part of a larger crime conspiracy surrounding stolen iPhones. The alleged leader of the operation, Victor Parra, issued calls for stolen phones on WhatsApp, offering money for migrants to bring them to him. Once he had the devices, a hacker would break into people's Apple Pays and empty their accounts before sending the phones to Colombia for reprogramming and selling. NYPD detectives believe the organized robbery scheme is linked to El Tren de Aragua, which they fear is sending its gangsters to cross the U.S.-Mexico border as part of a wave of asylum seekers. Is there a way to improve this situation? What can be done to accommodate the migrants as well as prevent the city budget from suffering? Moving forward, the United States requires comprehensive immigration reform that increases legal channels for migrants to enter the country. Because there are so few options presently, many people see filing asylum claims, however unlikely they are to succeed, as their only possible alternative, effectively breaking the system. Tell us what you think can be done to improve things. Don't forget to give the video a thumbs up and click on the subscribe button before you leave.